Global carbon emissions. A conversation characterized, unfortunately, by false predictions and emotionalism, but one that nonetheless is increasingly producing policy and taxation that are putting burdens on our three essential industries: energy, agriculture, and transportation.
I'll tell you something now, Jez. There is going to be food shortages worldwide. It's coming. It's coming quickly.
We are on a trajectory towards a national energy crisis. Fundamental realities are being laid by the wayside, so with today's video, it is my goal just to simply give an opportunity to refocus on some of those fundamental realities. I'm going to visually define three terms that are often used to promote climate alarmism. I'm going to add in the two elements that the same movement often leaves out of the picture, and bring all five together to suggest that where problems do exist, solutions lie almost directly under our nose. Upcoming are 5 basic and universally accepted facts, but I do want it to be understood that I am coming at you from a distinctly Christian worldview. You are free to use the comment section to bring opinions to the contrary, but it is my firm belief that acknowledging Christ as creator is the key to maintaining clarity in a time when much of the population is exchanging truth for a lie. Please share this video once you are done watching, and especially consider sharing with children. Also, use the link in the pinned comment to subscribe to my newsletter list so that we can stay in touch no matter what happens to my content on these social platforms. First up, defining 3 frequently used terms within the climate change movement: carbon, methane, and emissions. We'll start with carbon. Now, carbon is not an evil substance, but rather, according to World Book, one of the most familiar and important elements. Carbon compounds make up the living tissue of all plants and animals. The form of carbon being discussed in the news is primarily atmospheric carbon, also referred to as carbon dioxide or atmospheric CO2. Humans and animals exhale CO2, and CO2 also enters the atmosphere when any substance that contains carbon is burned, including wood, coal, and gasoline. Term number 2 is methane, or CH4. Methane is a natural gas. It forms when plants break down in places where there is little or no oxygen, which is why when a cow is breaking down plants in its rumen, it belches methane. Humans also emit methane, though it's not at the rate of that 2,000-pound cow. Third term is emissions, and emissions is simply a word that means to put something out. So when a train burns coal, the smoke coming from the smokestack is carbon emission. When your car burns gasoline, the gas and smoke coming out of that tailpipe is carbon emission. When the power grid powers your home or charges your electric car, it burns fossil fuel for energy, and that is carbon emission. When humans and animals exhale the gas coming out of our mouth, that is a carbon emission. And things could indeed be painted as very bleak when we consider that there are millions of pounds worth of CO2 and methane emissions entering the atmosphere every day. And these compounds do respond to sunlight and can increase the temperature of the atmosphere given the right conditions, though there is conflicting research within climate conversation even on that topic. But here's where we come to the 2 things that the climate change movement does not spend a lot of time discussing: carbon sequestration and methanotrophs. Carbon sequestration is the process designed to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. In fact, plants rely on carbon dioxide similarly to how humans rely on oxygen. Plants continuously pull CO2 out of the atmosphere. So when grass sprouts from the ground, that grass is pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. When a tree puts out leaves, those leaves are pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. When pasture and cattle are managed mindfully and root systems double and triple in depth, those root systems are pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. When underwater reefs and phytoplankton on the ocean's surface grow, that life is pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. Solar panels do not sequester carbon. Electric cars do not sequester carbon. Battery power over fossil fuel does not sequester carbon. Grasslands, forests, wetlands, and oceans, those are the only natural means by which CO2 can be removed from the atmosphere. Topic number 2 that is rarely a part of the climate change discussion is the topic of methanotrophs. Methanotrophs are microscopic methane-eating bacteria. These bacteria live in the soil, pulling methane out of the atmosphere. Now, the neat thing about these little creatures is that scientists are still discovering as to where they're at. It was originally thought that these bacteria only existed in soil, but just this year, scientists discovered methanotrophs in tree bark, which makes you wonder just where else these little guys could be hiding and doing their job. Now, I'm going to really touch quickly on this. You may sometimes hear messaging along the lines of overpopulation is creating a massive carbon footprint, which is one way of saying that humans are responsible for destroying the earth. And population control is a solution. But I want to give you a simple fact to combat that particular rhetoric. The UN itself cites that man-made environments such as industrial areas, urban areas, housing, factories, etc. only constitute around 1 to 3% of the Earth's total land surface, while 70% of the Earth's total land surface is covered in vegetation. To give you a visual picture, this is a scale model of urban areas versus vegetation right now. And keep in mind, this does not even factor in the amount of the Earth's surface that is covered by ocean. And as we reject this humanity is the problem messaging, this is when the picture starts to become really beautiful. Where there are legitimate concerns over excess emissions, whether methane or CO2, we as humans have the capacity to steward natural resources in a way that exponentially increases the removal of methane and carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Now, I'm speaking all of this from firsthand. I manage 30 acres of grassland in northeast Texas using a method of farming called Regenerative Agriculture. I was turned on to this method of farming and all of its benefits 4 years ago. I realized it gave me the opportunity to improve this 30 acres of land while simultaneously growing healthy food for my local community. I had no farming background and not a lot of money, just a few sheep and a few $100s to spend on electric fencing. I'll link my full story in the description of this video, but in short, with very simple and specific management practices. 4 years later, my land base has 200 to 300% more vegetation growing on it than neighboring pastures. And all of this vegetation is pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. The soil life is pulling methane out of the atmosphere. And my family and my local community have some of the healthiest and most sustainably grown food available. This kind of productivity would not be possible were it not for the animals residing on the land as well. And here's why. The sheep and cows are on pasture 24/7, fertilizing it by way of their manure, which contains natural ratios of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. These nutrients accelerate plant growth. Livestock manure is also a natural source of methane, which means it is feeding and increasing the population of that bacteria, subsequently increasing the amount of methane that is pulled from the atmosphere by my soil. I use electric fencing to rotate my livestock across my pasture. They graze a small part of the pasture, which is typically about 1 acre of 30 at a time, for a very short period of time, just 3 to 4 days on average. Then I will move them to a new piece of pasture, leaving the old one and the remaining 29 acres to rest. As it rests, it is pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. This rest period allows my grass to grow taller and put down deeper roots. Some of the grasses on my pasture have root systems below the ground that are 2 to 3 times deeper than the grass that is growing above the ground. So to come full circle here, is it a good idea to tax cattle, make it more expensive for farmers to raise them? Is covering 10 million plus acres in solar panels here in the USA actually going to help with carbon sequestration? And is this call for an end to fossil fuels pushing our nation towards an energy crisis? Please share this video, give it a thumbs up, comment, do whatever you can to get it out into the public, as I hope it will help to combat some of the problematic solutions that are popping up today. And watch this video next, which is Micro Ranching for Profit, my documentary for national grazing lands.